The CoinDesk Spotlight is brought to you by Nexo, the place to earn on Bitcoin, Ethereum, and more.
What is it about NFTs and status and brand? So think about in the old days of the 80s when people were preppy and wore polo shirts. And some people still wear polo shirts, but you could buy a regular shirt for $3 or pay $30 or $40 for something with an interesting logo on it as a signal of what you stood for, your brand, your affiliations, things like that. That same behavior that might have been broadcast in your high school to 30 people in your class is now something that touches millions or billions because of digital social media. So the amplification of your ability to control or alter, what you are to your community matters. So that touches on the status thing. Communities of interest. People used to be locked into smaller geographical buckets, and maybe they'd go to a church with the people in their neighborhood, because communities of interest can now spring up with low friction anywhere globally. For me, I'm a kitesurfer. I touch, tens of thousands of people digitally around the world that I may have never met before without the Metaverse as we kind of know it today, and prior instances like, Facebook, whatever. So the ability now to have much larger groups to take your status, your brand, your values, and broadcast to that is all instantiated in these little NFTs. So as we now move forward into communities of interest around social and environmental good, there is a clear way to now rally people that care about a certain cause, whatever that cause might be, to bring that value encapsulated into a collection of NFTs or a single NFT that you can drive either a big auction to support a specific function or something that's happening, or in a collection that people just, because of their brand affiliation and interest, can trade these items around, knowing that as they transact, they are generating monetary value to support those causes.
Yeah, that is really fascinating. I wonder if there are any challenges or things that could go wrong for that. Because, when the internet came out, everyone said, oh, we can self-publish. Everyone will be able to learn and be able to acquire information on a more democratic platform. And of course, sure, as that has evolved, we learned that, well, actually, there are centralized companies that are taking our data and selling it. And in some cases, we're being misinformed. Is there any danger of that in,
technology brings a lot of good, but it brings a lot of danger. It's a double-edged sword, because technology basically will accelerate anything it touches, right? So because of the things we described, the ability to reach a lot of people quickly, you can have inflection points up, down, good, bad, depending on what your subjective viewpoint is. Mm-hmm. And you're seeing it expressed in so many ways, whether it was the politics of the last election, or if you're on Wall Street and you're wondering, well, what does it mean if a mob on Robinhood can decide that AMC is really valuable when I don't? So traditional value systems are being torn apart because technology is unlocking crowd madness to make decisions. So yes, it can go wrong, but it can also be steered for good.
That's terrifying.
It is, yeah. I was terrified during the election cycle. Many days I sat there saying, what is happening to this world? So our intention, the name Metagood refers to what we hope will be the Genesis block for all good. So to the extent that, like blockchains, you have the Genesis block and you add and append to that chain items, transactions, a ledger of all value, and there can be branches off of that chain to create derivative Ethereum or Ethereum Classic or whatever it might be. We'd just like to see communities of interest.
So you're trying to steer it in the right direction.
Yes.
When you see something like Meta, formerly known as Facebook, entering the Metaverse and wanting to create their own version of a NFT network, will that threaten the smaller, decentralized communities that the NFT world have already created and are building?
This is another one of these, it's not just a double-edged sword, it's like a double-edged axe. You just don't know where this is going to go, because you have these two gigantic forces that are really running in parallel today, and you'd hope that it doesn't get controlled by one entity. And I think, there's some discussion and controversy about the video that Mark Zuckerberg used to explain what Meta is. He's taking the stance in that video that it's going to be an open platform. And, I hope it stays that way. Historically, Facebook's community development has started open and moved closed. So, maybe this time it's different.
It's a big human social experiment that we're going to see play in real time with this technological innovation, which is terrifying but exhilarating.
We'll see.
So, I like the concept of Metagood because instead of just, this is my social status, I've got CryptoPunk, it's also attached with a message of good, of charity. So maybe dive into that and how you hope to see that evolve.
Sure. Well, so the origin story of what became Metagood, I think, is instructive because I did also happen to be one of the early angel investors in Dapper Labs. And when Dapper had come out with CryptoKitties, it just was fascinating because it was one of the first consumer applications on what seemed to be a very technologically, sophisticated thing in Ethereum.
So crazy.
Yeah, and
just side note, the first time I heard about CryptoKitties, I lost feeling in my legs and I had to sit down because I just could not understand or process that people were spending tens of thousands of dollars on these digital cats. But go on.
Cats and the internet, somehow those things always work out well. And in this case, they were applied to a transaction engine where you could take your digital cat and someone else could take their digital cat with unique digital DNA and breed them and make little new digital cats that were each unique and sell them.
And, I didn't know what was going to happen with it. It's not as popular as it used to be, and I thought, that's the end of that project in NFTs as we know it. But no, it's gone the
It continues.
Next level.
It still sells millions of dollars of GMV a day, and many things have come off of it. But I do remember, looking at that, saying, "Wow, this is going to be the first and biggest consumer application on programmable blockchains like Ethereum," and certainly it became that. It collapsed the system because it was so popular, because Ethereum hadn't yet evolved to the point of scalability that it is today. And as I was funding it, I told the founders, I said, someday there are going to be applications beyond people trading these digital cats. There's got to be something better for this. And I am throwing an ocean conservation gala in a few months. Can you make me a special edition, one-off, special digital CryptoKitty cat for this ocean gala? I want to auction off for a cause. And I think they went cross-eyed because cats don't like water, but they did come up with something called Hanu Kitty, which is a cat with turtle fins and a shell. We auctioned that off, gave the proceeds to Captain Paul Watson. He parked his ship in front of the turtle nesting area of Antigua, and he protected the turtles through the season. And that idea has now, 3 years later, formed kind of a genesis idea for what Metagood is about, which is how do you rally individual groups or different disparate groups, communities of interest around different causes, whether they be environmental or social or goal-oriented, and get those groups to rally around a collection or an entity to provide the social capital and the capital to make these things happen.
Yeah, I love the idea of that because, instead of on your profile picture, you're showing off your really expensive NFT, you could show that you're supporting this social cause and that money could go toward that social cause as well.
Yeah, totally different way, and it, potentially also a way to bring transparency to what has been an opaque, charitable funding mechanism that's been around for decades. Where you don't really know where the pennies of your dollar go. In this case, because everything can be expressed digitally and transparently on blockchain smart contracts, you'll know ultimately if I buy this item and this portion goes to that cause, you can see what got spent on administration, what got spent on the actual thing, and you might even actually be able to move a slider that says, I want this much of it to go to those things.
You mentioned that this technology kind of amplifies, in a way, human emotion and, trends and whatnot. And so will a lot of these things, though, be a flash in the pan kind of fad?
Yeah. You mean NFTs in general?
Yeah, the different projects.
Yeah, I think it, like anything else, I think there's going to be kind of a sub-wave, a foundational wave of how things are done that is not going away. And they're going to be, rivulets of action that are up and down around that. Let's take, for example, the music business. Okay, so if you think about, say, let's take a wonderful, grand piece of work, Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, 1808 or so. It's written around that time. Not many people like Beethoven, and an incredibly impressive piece of art. From a commercial standpoint, I don't know how much revenue was generated off of the Fifth Symphony, but it probably wasn't a lot then. Once you were able to add digital, first analog, and then digital scalable technologies to produce and distribute music, you went from one great artist to thousands of genres and many, many, many different, whether it's like Guns N' Roses or Doja Cat, you empowered a lot of creators to do really amazing things that Beethoven would probably go cross-eyed over, saying, oh my God, look at that, And so now you've got a music industry that does still, in its decline, $23 billion a year. There's been nearly $1 trillion of value in a lot of ups and downs, a lot of hits that faded away, but along a long, long trend line of explosions of content, creation of communities of interest around IP expressed digitally. It's the same thing. We're in the same thing again, but now it's every asset in the world.
With blockchain technology, when people spoke about its potential in early days, there was tackling real estate, there was intellectual property, but instead, again, I'm seeing these more, gaming-related, social, art, NFTs that are coming out. When do we get to those bigger projects?
It's happening, I think, it's a little bit like the internet. Right? The internet had to kind of creep up on people on applications that were low friction to implement and easy to distribute, like email. And then ultimately, the big companies and governments took that infrastructure to automate and scale regular behavior that had been kind of encrusted in these legacy systems for decades or centuries. So it takes a little longer to unwind that stuff or map out what had happened and map that onto a new framework than to create new things from the ground up. So I think that's where we are. We're basically in a moment now where you're taking blockchain, and one way to describe blockchain is a context-aware cloud where every digital item on the edge of that cloud knows where every other digital item is and can move. Kind of like, an email knows that it's attached to this cloud and it can find where its destination is. Now you can transact mutually. And so everything is aware of everything else, but it just has to get mapped onto that system. So it's happening right now.
You said you're working on, or you're familiar with folks who are working with a project to do land title registries globally.
Yes.
Tell me a bit about that.
Yeah. Well, land title is a very interesting category, right? Because if you think about it's a little bit like in the old days, you had sort of these legacy computer systems that had to make their way from mainframes to minis to workstations to PCs, and now your smartphone. So distributed computing brought power to the masses by putting everything in a small form factor that allowed low friction transaction. Right? So land title and real estate ownership is one of these things that's kind of still in the mainframe or mini computer days where you have to go and register stuff and look up, I don't know how long it takes to look up a land title in a title, company, and the transactions are high friction and very expensive. Just as like wire transfers are compared to like sending something, through cyberspace with Bitcoin or something. So I think what's happening now is that space is going to also be componentized, where once there's clarity of the asset, and it's just put in a digital wrapper and expressed in a little wallet, like a ticket or a cryptocurrency, you'll be able to transfer title someday without having to wait weeks and to register things and pay thousands of dollars or maybe millions of dollars to brokers depending on the size of the property.
And do you foresee governments actually agreeing and collaborating? And how would you have countries, agreeing to this, a global registry?
You know, there's a big need. There are entrenched interests. You know, I'll give you an example of a country that really would like to do this, and they're just trying to figure out how. The city of Cairo was modeled after the city of Paris. It was meant to hold about 700,000 people. There's around 20 million people there, but the government doesn't actually know because they don't have addresses, and they don't have identities, and they don't have blocks of land that are clearly registered. So imagine running a country where you have 20 to 30 million people, you think, in a city. You don't know their names, you don't know their addresses. How do you provide welfare? So what does the government in Egypt do? They get subsidy from the World Bank and other places. They buy a lot of stuff, and then they sell food, electricity, and other things below cost. And they just kind of hand it out. And if prices go up, there's riots, and then they have to do something about it, right? So you don't want to be running a country like that. It would be a lot cleaner if people, by default, where they had already squatted, were given the rights to those land. You had clarity of title. You could take that to a bank and get a mortgage. You could fund a cafe, a coffee shop, and you would start an economy. And that's what Hernando de Soto did in the country of Peru that led to the book Mystery of Capital, which is, you know, defined as, or he describes, you know, capitalism, the fundamental building block around capitalism is clear title, in this case to land. And that is what the blockchain is bringing us in every aspect of... Every
asset is going to be tokenized or wrapped.
It can be.
In a token on the blockchain.
Yes, and that's the metaverse.
That would be incredible. Hard to fathom at the moment. Maybe, you know, we'll see that growing in the future. We're already seeing it right now. Maybe I want to get into you're known as the Kites VC on Twitter. Part of that is you have a lifestyle where you're kite surfing around the world. You're speaking to a lot of like-minded kind of folks who like that aggressive and thrill and adventure, and talking about tech at the same time. But so maybe in your own words, how does kite surfing inform your approach to investing and being in the tech world?
You know, it's been a fascinating journey. So in the 90s, I had started an ISP that became a data center company that had operations in 10 countries, and year 2000, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley took it public. And I retired for a bit, and I started kiteboarding right when that sport started. And somehow there was a moment where Sergey Brin and Larry Page were spotted on the bay kite surfing, and everybody in Silicon Valley, you know, a lot of young people wanted to learn how to kite, and they didn't want to ask Sergey or Larry, so they would come to me. And so I ended up forming this little community that would meet initially on Maui once a year. And it was, as you said, you know, aggressive is one word for it, but I think, you know, the people that are willing to try to kiteboard are a special breed. You know, if you take 100 people and you ask them all, do you want to learn how to kiteboard? You might get one that looks at it.
You gotta be open-minded.
Yes. You have to be open-minded. You have to be incredibly resilient. When you're out there on the water with this stuff, you're essentially failing 99.99% of the time, and you're correcting because you're facing a gigantic multivariate equation of wind and waves and gear types and all kinds of things that are harnessing power that can throw you in the air 40 feet in a tenth of a second. And if you mess up, you know, it's not pretty sometimes. So the people that are willing to take that on are exactly the kind of people that start companies. It's a community-driven thing where you have like-minded people that are willing to go off and just do shit and learn from their 99% of the time failing to try to correct to get back on track. And that's what life is about, and that's what companies are about. So that leads to, well, how do you take that and turn it into companies? And that's all I do.
Yeah, instead of a doctoral degree, maybe you should get both a doctoral degree and learn how to kite surf. Well, in many ways, the pandemic accelerated the development of the crypto industry with the blockchain technology and the skyrocketing price of various cryptocurrencies we're seeing right now. What do you see as the future of remote working? Do you think that will continue? What is the future of the workplace?
You
Is
know,
it all kite surfing on beaches or what?
You know, we both have friends that live that way. They literally are anywhere in the world where it's warm and windy at that time, and they get on their screen and work. And some people know I'm also actually the first investor in Zoom Video. And I was having this conversation with Eric Yuan yesterday because we were talking about GitLab as for example. So not every company is going to be like this, but GitLab just went public. It's worth $15.5 billion. They have over 2,000 people. They have never, ever, ever had an office. Think about that, right? You have a company worth $15 billion, thousands of people that's never had an office. And I have a smaller example. When we started Treasure Data, I seeded Zoom at the same time that Eric Yuan, who founded Zoom, seeded me. And so we created this company called Treasure Data. Our engineering team was initially in Japan. So from day one, we were born on Zoom. And I think this should be a new hashtag, born on Zoom, because we learned early on how to not have an office. We did get an office, but then we got acquired by SoftBank. SoftBank is now spinning out ARM. We were stuck inside ARM. NVIDIA's buying ARM. Treasure Data is being spun out again. We decided not to have an office. So we have, over 500 people, a seven-figure run rate in revenue, and we do not have an office, and people are all over the world, and the company ultimately is going to go public again. So you can create these virtual nations, companies with virtual infrastructure, and they can work fine. The behavior is a little bit different, but they do work. So I think we're going to be in a world of remote and hybrid, and the intersection of those.
Wow, interesting. And finally, you are known as a prolific networker, but at the same time, I've heard you describe yourself as a computer nerd. Like you'll sit at your computer, you'll build things. How do you reconcile that introverted and social nature?
Life is full of dichotomies. When I was a kid, I was always the kid in the back of the room, just helping people with their homework. And all the girls would come and I'd do their homework for them, and I'd hang out with them, and I was this quiet, very Chinese kid. And so
that's how you hit on girls. I'll do your homework.
Yeah, well, I still don't know. I don't know that I ever learned how to hit on girls.
Okay.
I'm very good at helping people with homework.
Okay,
that I do know. But I think over time, when I got totally addicted to kite surfing.
Oh, so he knows your face?
For some reason, I think because instead of people doing homework, I'm not helping people do homework. Now I'm helping them get on the water. And that just started this little community of interest that just started to expand, and I think it's kind of taken on its own life. And so, I'm somebody that I like to build stuff. So on holidays, I'll build little Arduino robots and things at home, and that's fun for me.
But would you say it's important? Like you have to go out there, you have to meet people with.
Yeah, I guess and it's something that I never intended. But it's very, very helpful. I mean, I think it gives. I think my life today, I described to some people I feel like I'm this little spider on this enormous spider web of people holding hands, and I just hang out and I wait for things to vibrate. And then when I feel a vibration, I'll run over to the vibration, I'll check it out, and if it resonates with me as an investor, I think because I've just been investing for so long and had some hits, all the other spiders will come and run. And so I can provide capital beyond dollars to people with ideas, to vet their ideas, to test them out in the same way that I'd get somebody on the water kite surfing where I was like, well, I don't know if it's going to work. You're probably going to splat a few times, but let's give it a try and see. And let's iterate and make it happen.